see the entrance here is really narrow. The wind blowing in, it's pretty complicated. We're at the first lock, Inverness side of the Caledonian Canal. We just got up to the top.
We're in Gare Lucky Lock, and there's a lock here, and then a swing bridge, and then another lock. And we have Daydream Believer next to us, who watch our YouTube channel, so thank you very much. And then another American boat behind them, who are from Seattle.
Hi, this is Tom, and welcome back to Life 4.0. Today, I'm going to introduce you to the beautiful Caledonian Canal that cuts through the heart of the Scottish Highlands. I will prepare you to safely navigate the canal's many locks and bridges. We will discuss important tips and tricks for handling your boat through this wonder of human engineering. In the end, you will have the confidence and clarity to take on this passage between East and West Scotland yourself. At the outset, let's get one matter out of the way. Why would you bother to take the Caledonian Canal? It is really quite clear when you pull up a map. If you are in the inner Hebrides of Scotland and want to go east, or, like us, in the east, and eagerly wanted to explore western Scotland, your route around the top of Scotland is fraught with risks. There is the aptly named Cape Wrath, and the even more troublesome Pentland Firth, with tidal currents amongst the fastest in the world, peaking at 15 knots. Or, if you want to avoid the drama and save yourself some distance, 50 nautical miles versus about 300, try the Caledonian Canal with its zero tide, zero currents, and very friendly people. If you've watched our how-to videos before, you will know how we organize them in a very structured manner to help you get the answers you need quickly. This video is no different. We will cover 4 topic areas: preparing the boat and crew, tips for the first lock transit, tips for a flight of locks, and finally, route highlights and overnights. Okay, so let's dive into the boat and crew. Okay, so the Scottish Canals recommends to have 4 lines. They say about 15 meters long, and I would say that's about the minimum length. More longer would be helpful. So we've got 2 bow lines up here, and then we've got a line on each stern quarter, one there, and one over here on the starboard side. So you need the length to be able to toss the line up to the lock tender, so they can wrap it around a hook on the top of the wall and then pass the line back to you. So that's why you need the length. We have an extra line here. This is a 25 meter long line, which is a little bit too long, but one of the locks we came through, the stern line, really wasn't enough to throw up to the top of the wall and get it back and have enough to go around the cleat and manage the line. It's really helpful to have a fender board on at least one side when you're going through the locks. The locks have a lot of gunk and algae and stuff on the lock walls from all the water contact, and it can make your fenders kind of messy and your hull kind of scratched a bit. So quite a few boats are using fender boards. I'll show you what we've got. It's about 3 meters long or so, 2.5, 3 meters, and it goes on the outside of the fenders. And one thing that we tried that worked well is tying the lines quite a ways aft and quite a ways forward up here, up to this stanchion. If you tie them vertically, like right up to here, the board tends to swing back and forth when you're scraping along the lock wall. So it's helpful to have a good angle of the line that holds the fender board up. The other thing is the fender board, it helps to have the lines going straight down through rather than sideways, because the outside of the fender board is going to take a lot of abrasion, and we had one line that went straight through and back up to tie down, and just on one lock it practically wore the line through completely. So you want it amidships, the widest part of your boat, which is right here for us. We also have a shorter one. This is another fender board that I found first from scrap wood. It worked pretty well. It can bridge 2 fenders, but the longer the better. And so we're kind of holding on to this one in case we need it. And just in general, you want to have a lot of fenders out. We have a fender way in the stern, one in the middle between the fender board and the stern, and then we've got a fender down here up on the bow,
and back here on each one of the stanchions. So again, fender boards are really important. The other thing to keep in mind is you want them low. This might seem, it's just off the water, and it might be kind of too low, you might think about, but what happens in some of the locks is you rise up high enough that the wall of the lock is about mid-hull height, and so you want your fenders low and your fender board low to be able to continue to fend yourself off when you're at the very top of the lock. So we've got a total of 10 fenders. I put out quite a few on one side, hoping that that's the side that we're directed to go on. But it's helpful to have a few fenders on both sides. Some boats we've seen actually just split their fender inventory and put half on one side and half on the other. I'm a little crazy about fenders. It's cheap insurance to save your hull from being damaged. So we have quite a few, and I like to put more on the side where we have contact on. So this is the starboard side, and I've got a fender up here on the deck that I can throw over, one here, and there's one more back behind Karen there up on the deck, ready to be thrown over. We also have our step prepared and ready to go, just to make it easier to step off if the dock is quite low.
Okay, next let's talk about the right personal gear for both comfort and safety. First off, a good pair of rugged gloves are helpful for handling the lines, some of which may get pretty wet and dirty from exposure to the lock chamber. Next, a good set of foul weather gear is extremely helpful. Let's face it, it rains a lot in Scotland. We had some amount of rain every day during our passage in the canal. And then life jackets. The lock tenders are wearing them as part of their job, so should you. Make it part of your routine to put your life jacket on in the morning, at least during the time you are working your boat through the locks. Finally, Karen and I find it invaluable to have a pair of wireless headsets. They allow us to hear each other without yelling. It allows me to easily tell her what I'm seeing at the top of the lock wall, and likewise for her to let me know of any issues at the helm. There are countless opportunities for physical damage to your boat. Staying in close contact with the rest of the crew is critical. On a related note about communications, you want to make sure your VHF radio is working and that you have an easy way to hear the radio from the cockpit. Or, even better, make sure to have a handheld VHF at the ready in the cockpit. A final note on the people side. If you normally have just 2 people on board, I would strongly recommend you ask a friend to join you. With 3 people, the work through the locks is much less stressful. One person can be at the helm, while 2 people manage the lines, one on the bow and one on the stern. To wrap this section up, let's talk about money. The Caledonian Canal is managed by Scottish Canals. You can find lots of helpful information on their website, and that is where you go to buy a transit license. Usually, a 7-day license is sufficient. You'll need to pick a start date when you buy your license. And when you enter your first sea lock, they will give you a helpful skipper's guide that shows the entire route with all of the locks and bridges and plenty of other valuable information. So, your boat and crew are all ready, and you've bought your license. Let's get into the meat of it. Tips for your first lock transit. First, have your handheld VHF ready and set to channel 74, the channel that all of the locks use. If the lock is closed, tie off on one of the waiting pontoons. With the exception of the sea locks, there is usually ample room on a variety of fixed and floating pontoons to tie to. If the lock chamber is open, proceed slowly into the chamber. If it is not too crowded, the lock tender can help you with your lines. Otherwise, plan to put 1 or 2 crew members ashore for this task. Don't hesitate to ask questions to the lock tender. They are there to make sure you are safe. In some cases, they may direct you to tie on the port or starboard side, but more likely they will leave this up to you. Most of the time, you'll want to stick with one side, where you already have your fender board rigged. Otherwise, you'll be constantly moving extra fenders from one side to the other. It is best to pass the stern line to the lock tender first, not the bow. This will help stop your boat and bring it alongside the lock wall, instead of swinging your stern out. Once you get the stern secured, you can secure the bow line. There are a variety of attachment points on the top of the wall. The most common are these double swiveling hooks. There are a few single hooks, and set back from the wall, there can be a few stout bollards. If you have the option, try to stay in the aft end of the lock when you are up-locking. There will be considerably less turbulence as the lock is filling.
Oh, here it goes. Here comes a wave. God, it's just amazing. Whee! Here it comes. Right down, this one's right down the center or more on the left. So the front boat ends up getting tossed around quite a bit. The guy next to us, he's like, no man, the front position, that's for visitors. He says, there's no way I'm going in the front.
If you have to go forward, find the sill mark on the wall and don't proceed any further than this point. The sill marks the area where the lock is very shallow. Likewise, if you are in the aft end of the lock, make sure your stern is clear of the gates so that they can close safely. The boat will surge forward and backwards as the lock chamber is filling. Be prepared to hold tension on the lines and take up slack as the boat rises. Also, a second wrap around the hook can help. If downlocking, ease the line out slowly, but not so much that the boat drifts away from the wall. If you have a bow thruster, you can use it in the lock, but try to use it sparingly. The wash from the thruster can push a neighboring boat hard into the wall on their side. Shut your engine off once you get settled on the wall. This helps reduce the fumes inside the chamber. You may be joined by a long canal tour boat. These boats often have priority. The lock tender will have them enter the lock first before private boats are allowed to enter. While you are waiting inside the lock chamber, have a chat with your neighboring boat to agree on who will exit the lock first, so there is no confusion. Once the lock gates open, you are free to slowly exit. Now that we have talked about your first lock experience, let's go over some tips for dealing with the flight of locks. On the Inverness end, there's the Muirtown flight of 4 locks. Then, at the Fort Augustus flight, there are 5 locks. And finally, at the western end of the canal, at Fort William, there's the granddaddy of them all, Neptune's staircase of 8 locks in a row. There's a few important differences about a flight of locks versus a single lock transit, and there are additional differences based on whether you are up-locking or down-locking. Let's tackle the up-locking flight process first. You'll approach the first lock in the flight like any other lock transit. Although, be prepared to hail the lock tender on VHF 74 and be willing to wait on an adjacent pontoon, as it can take a long time to clear the flight of any downlocking vessels. Once you rise to the top of the first lock, you will need to put 2 crew members ashore to manage the bow and stern lines. If you don't have a third person, the person at the helm will also need to manage the stern line. The reason for putting 2 crew on the wall is to be able to walk the boat into the next lock chamber once it opens. This is a step that is best taken slow and cautiously, as you want to hold the boat off the wall by about 1 meter so that the fenders don't get caught in the gate apparatus. This is where a fender board really helps, as do the wireless headsets. Close communication between the line handlers on the wall and the person controlling the forward and reverse on the engine is critical. The flight requires active attention by the bow and stern line handlers, as they need to keep bringing in tension and controlling the boat from swinging too far forward or aft from the turbulence of the water. Once you are at the top lock of the flight, your crew can come back on board and manage tension and release of the lines once the last lock gate opens. Be prepared for a transit of a flight to take several hours. You'll be a source of great spectator interest while you are running the flight. Some people may approach you with questions, which is all fine. Just don't let it distract you from the job at hand. Now for the process of downlocking. In general, downlocking is much easier than uplocking. The main reason is that the lock chamber has no turbulence as it is draining.
So much more mellow when you go down. Like right now we're going down quite quickly, so it's probably turbulent on the other side, but But on this side, we just watch the water level go down on the gate.
When you enter the first lock on the downlocking flight, feel free to proceed all the way forward because of the lack of turbulence. Just make sure to stop before the cavity in the wall where the lock gate will retract into. As the lock is draining, your boat may drift forward and overlap with this cavity. We ran into this issue several times in Neptune's staircase. Tension on the stern line plus a touch of reverse gear will help. You will still need 2 crew on the wall, walking the boat down to the next lock chamber. When you get to the last lock, the crew will need to come back on board and manage the lines from there, so they aren't left behind on the wall when you depart the flight. Also, there is a chance when you drop to the bottom of the lock chamber that your line can get pinched around the hook and the edge of the wall, and you can't get it to release. We had that issue one time. If this happens, hail the lock tender for assistance. Okay, so let's bring all of this together and discuss highlights of the route, including options for overnights. The Caledonian Canal consists of 29 locks and 11 bridges. To enter the canal system, you will use a sea lock, the opening of which is restricted by the tide level. On the Inverness end, it is the Clacknaharry Sea Lock, while on the Fort Williams end, it is the Corpac Sea Lock. There is a small marina at Corpac where you can stay overnight, or you can just time your arrival for the opening of the lock. On the Inverness end, there is no place to wait other than anchoring, so it is best to talk to the lock tender on VHF 74 to make sure they know you are coming and that you have a reservation. But once you've done both Clacknaharry locks, you'll have the spacious Seaport Marina inside to stay overnight at, with access by foot to grocery stores and other supplies. An overnight at Seaport is included in the transit license, whereas the Corpac Marina is not. But once you are through the Corpac Sea Lock, the Corpac Basin provides space to wait alongside before tackling Neptune's staircase. For either Neptune's staircase or the equivalent on the eastern end, the Muirtown flight, it can be helpful to walk the flight the day before and ask questions to the lock tenders so you know what to expect and when the first opening will be. From here, I'll walk you through a westbound passage from the top of the Muirtown flight and after passing through the Docgarock Lock. Keep an eye on the port side for one of several weirs on the canal. With their strong current flow, they should be given a wide berth.
Coming over here, we're going to join up with the River Ness. So this is an elevated waterway that then spills down into this river. That's kind of freaky. Rapids and kind of a sluice goes down to an extremely shallow river. Crazy to think that it's like 4 or 5 meters deep on this side of that cofferdam.
The canal will then open up into the expansive Loch Ness. The skipper's guide notes several anchorage spots in this area, but anchoring in these long, narrow bodies of water can be challenging with the depth. A good option is the Urquhart Castle, where a mooring buoy is available. With the size of the locks, that is LOCH lock, it can get very windy. But if the wind is in your favor, you might have a chance to sail through these sections. At the end of the Loch Ness is the Fort Augustus flight, where there are plenty of pontoons, both at the bottom and at the top, to wait for an opening or to stay overnight. West from Fort Augustus, there are lots of narrow sections that demand close attention, and just beyond the Collocky Lock, which is a nice quiet option for an overnight, is another weir on the starboard side to stay clear of. At Loch Oich, you will be at the highest point of the canal system, 34 meters above sea level. While it has several open sections, some of which you might be able to anchor at, there are many buoys and markers that require careful navigation to stay in the deeper water. At the western end of Loch Oich, you'll start the downlocking process at the double Lagan locks.
All right, so this is our first lock to downlock. These are the Lagan locks. There's 3 of us in the chamber. We have one other large boat with us and a smaller one in front of us. And there's another lock below us. You can't really see it right now because we're so high, but once they open those front doors, we'll get to see the next chamber.
At the time we did it, they lowered the first lock all the way down so that the second lock was not used. Here you will enter the last big open body of water, Loch Lochy, before a pair of locks and a swing bridge at Gairlochie.
Lock tender just said that this one goes down 4.5 meters. It's the one that goes down the deepest.
And finally, the very spacious waiting pontoon area at Bonnevie, at the top of Neptune's staircase. An overnight here is highly recommended, since it takes nearly an entire day to do the staircase, the swing bridge at the bottom, a double lock, then the Corpac Basin and its sea lock. But in the end, you will have definitely earned a pint of beer, or perhaps a wee dram. That's a wrap for our tips on navigating the splendid Caledonian Canal in Scotland. Be sure to look for our second video on the Caledonian Canal, which complements this more technical discussion, where we share with you the many sightseeing opportunities along the way. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Be sure to check out our playlist of other how-to videos on our Life 4.0 channel, as well as our many sailing adventure videos, as we explore this amazing planet one anchorage at a time. Lastly, if you have not already, please consider subscribing to our channel and commenting below. We always love hearing from our viewers. Until then, fair winds.